If you're starting from $0 in 2026 and the normal retirement plan feels like a 40-year sentence, this is the strategy that I would use myself to have a real shot at being financially free by 2031. I've run this play already. The second run would go a lot faster for me because I know which decisions did all of the heavy lifting and which ones cost me a few years on my timeline. By the end of this video, you'll have a retirement target, an account structure, an asset allocation, and the first transfer that you can make this week. I'm Trey Sellers. I hit financial independence before I hit 40 by pairing the financial independence retire early movement with Bitcoin. And this is the channel where I break down exactly how I did it. So make sure you subscribe because this is the video that I wish somebody had given me when I first started out on this journey. Now, if you're happy putting 10% of every paycheck into an index fund and waiting until your 60s, your HR packet already has a plan for you. This video is for the person who wants work to be optional much sooner and is willing to make a few extra hard decisions now to buy back years later. The first decision is all about your target. The number you've probably heard is incomplete in two ways, and both of those can keep you working much longer than necessary. Being able to retire really comes down to a number. The day your assets can cover your expenses, your paycheck becomes optional. That can happen at 35, 65, or anywhere in between. So step one is to figure out what that number actually is. The traditional formula for this is pretty simple. You take what you spend in a year and you multiply it by 25. So if you spend $60,000 in a year, your traditional FIRE number is $1.5 million. That's how much you need to have saved up in an investment portfolio to cover those expenses later on in life. Now, if you're starting from absolute zero, I know how that $1.5 million feels. It feels impossible, impossibly far away. In fact, it may feel so far away that even starting with that first dollar feels pointless. And that's where a lot of people freeze up and never actually get going. So keep that $1.5 million in mind. We're going to come back to it. That 25 times framework is a really useful starting point, but it was built around a traditional portfolio. Later in the video, we're going to adjust that target for a portfolio that includes Bitcoin, and you're going to see exactly what that impact can be. So let's bring it back to that default plan that you've heard a million times before. You take 10 or 15% of your paycheck and you put it into an index fund and you wait. At $650 a month and a 7% return, you reach $1.5 million in approximately 38 years. The calculation works. It will get you there. But the question is about the timeline that it takes to get you there. If you start at 25, you become financially independent in your early 60s. You followed this plan, you built a portfolio, but you paid the price over your entire working life. Warren Buffett may be the best investor who has ever lived, and more than 90% of his fortune arrived after his 60th birthday. Compounding is backloaded. Most of the reward shows up at the end, and the default retirement plan puts you on the same curve, just at a smaller scale. But there's a different way to approach this. You can spread the effort over almost 40 years, or you can concentrate much more of it into a focused 4-year window. I chose the concentrated version. I call it the stacking sprint. The stacking sprint front loads your savings, while each new dollar can still make a very meaningful difference. And then it gives those dollars more time to compound. You accept a harder season now, so your paycheck can become optional much earlier. A sprint needs a track, though. I'm going to give you 4 different possible lanes on this track, and you can have the whole thing running in under 2 weeks. Lane 1 is a 401k with an employer match, if your job offers one. Not everyone has access to this lane, but if you do, it should be the first thing to get running. Lane 2 is a Roth IRA. You fund it with money that you've already paid taxes on. It grows tax-free, and qualified withdrawals come out tax-free in retirement as well. The 2026 contribution limit is $7,500 or $625 per month. Lane 3 is a regular brokerage account. You don't get the Roth tax treatment, but you also don't have a contribution limit and you don't have early withdrawal penalties. That accessibility really matters when you're trying to stop working earlier than the traditional retirement age. And lane 4 is your Bitcoin on-ramp. You need an exchange account where you can buy the Bitcoin, plus a plan to move that Bitcoin into self-custody. Coins on an exchange are an IOU. Coins secured by keys you control are yours and yours alone. Now, very importantly, don't spend 3 weeks comparing platforms. Pick a major low-cost brokerage, open the account, and put a little bit of money in it to make sure that the transfer works. The order you fund accounts matters much more than the logo on the app. Let's go back to lane 1. For your 401k, contribute exactly enough to earn the full employer match. You put in $1, they put in $1. It's a 100% return the moment you fund the account, and you won't find another guaranteed offer like that. The 2026 employee contribution limit is $24,500, but I wouldn't automatically max it out during a stacking sprint. If you want to retire early, you need enough accessible wealth to cover the years before retirement accounts become easy to use. Next, you need to pay off any debt with double-digit interest rate. A credit card that's charging 24% compounds against you much faster than any reasonable portfolio assumption compounds in your favor. Paying it off saves the full 24% interest cost without taking any investment risk. This is a no-brainer. From there, decide how much of your savings needs to stay accessible. A Roth account is very valuable, and Roth contributions can generally be accessed under applicable rules. But if you retire early, you still need assets that can pay your expenses until retirement accounts become easier to use at 59 and a half, and you don't have penalties associated with those withdrawals. What you don't want is every dollar trapped behind some age restriction. So everything left goes across the Roth, the brokerage account, and the Bitcoin stack based on your tax situation, how many years you expect to fund before that 59 and a half, and the allocation you can hold through serious drawdowns. Once those accounts are open, you're on your way to building an engine that turns your savings rate into financial independence. It took me too long to understand how this engine actually works. Early in the process, your savings rate does almost all of the work. The return matters much more after the portfolio already is large. Say you have $10,000 invested and you earn 10%. You made $1,000. Now say you earn $80,000 and you increase your savings rate from 10% to 40%. You just added another $24,000 to your investment portfolio in the same year. The higher savings rate contributed 24 times as much as the market returned. Early on, you are the compounding engine. The stacking sprint is pretty simple. You set your savings rate as high as you reasonably can sustain. Automate the transfers for the day after your payday and hold that rate for a focused 4-year window and increase it if you possibly can. The standard advice is to start at 5% and increase the rate by 1% a year. That's perfectly fine if you want the standard timeline. But a sprint front loads that savings because $1 invested in year 1 gets the entire remaining period to compound. And having an end date on this sprint, it makes the intensity sustainable. You can accept a difficult 4-year season when you know it has an end date, especially when you can picture the other side. The more control over your mornings, more room to leave a bad job, and fewer life decisions that are dictated by your next paycheck. Now your accounts are open, the transfers are automated, and your savings rate is high. The next question is what you buy every month. For this retirement projection, I'm using 10% for total market index fund and 25% for Bitcoin. These are planning assumptions. Returns are going to be uneven, and changing the measurement period can change the historical averages substantially as you're looking back. But that doesn't matter because this is a planning tool. We're just trying to get on the right trajectory for our savings toward financial independence. At 10%, money doubles about every 7 years. At 25%, it doubles about every 3 years. Over a 4 or 5 year stacking sprint window, that difference can have a meaningful impact on your retirement timeline. The allocation you choose determines the modeled return and the volatility that you must endure. A 90-10 index to Bitcoin split models to around 11.5%. A 70-30 split models to 14.5%, and a 50-50 split models to about 17.5%. A Bitcoin-heavy 30-70 split models to 20.5%. I run heavier than the first 3 examples, and I definitely did this during my own sprint. However, that conviction takes years of studying Bitcoin. Your starting allocation should reflect the drawdown you can hold without abandoning the plan. Typically, your Bitcoin allocation should match the level of conviction that you have in the asset over the long term. And large drawdowns need to be a part of your retirement projection from the very beginning. Bitcoin's historical performance has been incredible, but it's also come with drawdowns of 84%, 72%, 55%, and 77%, and we're in the middle of another 50% drawdown. I've lived through each of those. Each one felt like the end of the asset while it was happening. It's difficult. That experience is why I plan liquidity and volatility together. Traditional advice says to keep 6 to 12 months of expenses in cash, so an emergency never forces you to sell an investment. I don't think that makes much sense if you've built a meaningfully liquid portfolio, though. You give up years of compounding to protect against an emergency that may never ever happen, while inflation works against that cash every single day. Money you already know that you're spending soon has a different job. Your rent, next month's bills, and anything else due in the near future belong in cash. A separate emergency fund is different. I treat my liquid, compounding assets, including stocks and Bitcoin, as the broader safety net. If I lose my income during a drawdown, I may have to sell a portion of those assets to cover the expenses. That would be unfortunate for sure, but it wouldn't mean the strategy failed, even after accounting for the possibility of selling during a bad market. I believe the opportunity cost of holding large cash reserve for years is usually higher. Before you buy, stress test at least a 50% drawdown, and remember that Bitcoin's history has been worse. Know which liquid assets you would sell first, how many months of expenses they could cover, and whether you can keep most of the portfolio invested while you solve for the actual emergency. Now you have your target, the accounts, savings rate, and the asset allocation. We can return to the $1.5 million target and adjust it for the portfolio you actually plan to own. That $1.5 million target comes from the 4% rule. In 1994, financial planner William Bengen looked through market history and found that a retiree holding U.S. stocks and bonds could withdraw 4% every year, adjusted for inflation, and make the money last through the historical 30-year periods he studied. Divide your spending by 4% or multiply it by 25, and you get the traditional baseline retirement number. The 25 times number is still useful. However, it was built for stocks and bonds, so I model the Bitcoin portion of my portfolio separately. I use a 4% withdrawal lens for traditional assets and an 8% withdrawal lens for the Bitcoin sleeve. If 70% of your portfolio is Bitcoin and 30% is traditional assets, your blended withdrawal rate is about 6.8%. For $60,000 of annual spending, a 6.8% blended rate produces a retirement target of approximately $882,000 or 14.7 times annual expenses. You'll notice that's drastically lower than the $1.5 million traditional target. If you change the allocation, you change the target. A 50-50 portfolio produces a 6% blended return and a $1 million target. The 8% Bitcoin lens assumes that Bitcoin continues compounding faster than traditional assets over the relevant time horizon. It also assumes you can reduce spending in a bad year, have a plan for taxes, custody, liquidity, drawdowns, and withdrawal order. It's simply a planning assumption, not an excuse to undersave. Now we can put the plan on a timeline. Week 1, open your accounts. Week 2, automate your first transfers. From there, hold the savings rate, grow it if you can, and keep buying according to your allocation. For a $60,000 a year spender, the Bitcoin-heavy 30/70 portfolio produces a target of about $882,000. Using a modeled return of roughly 20%, the monthly savings amount produces these timelines. $3,000 takes about 9 years. $4,000 takes about 8, $6,000 about 6, and at $8,000 a month, the projection crosses the target in a little over 5 years. For comparison, if you skip Bitcoin, assume a 12% index return, and keep the traditional $1.5 million target, saving $4,000 a month reaches that target in about 13 years. Still pretty good. The savings rate is doing most of the early work. The Bitcoin allocation can compress the timeline further if those return assumptions hold, but the additional volatility is also part of that same decision, so make sure that you are prepared for it. The $8,000 row is a path that I would target on a restart. It's aggressive. It requires unusually high savings rate, a Bitcoin-heavy allocation, and enough conviction to keep buying while the projection looks completely broken during a drawdown. Your row might be $6,000 or $4,000 or some other number, but the important change is that your retirement date stops being on a timeline that somebody else is choosing. It becomes a set of inputs that you understand and you can adjust and control. If you increase income, lower expenses, raise your savings rate, or change the allocation, you can see exactly what happens to the timeline. And I've got a really cool tool called the Fire BTC Compass that can help you plan for your specific number using your expenses, your asset mix, and all of the other planning assumptions that you would like to include. It's at calc.firebtc.io, and you can find the link in the description. You can start this week without rebuilding your entire financial life. First, I want you to write down what you spent during the last 12 months. Multiply that number by 25 to get your traditional FIRE baseline. Second, open the Roth, the brokerage account, and the Bitcoin on-ramp you plan to use. Put some money in each account, just so you know that transfers work. Third, set an automatic transfer for the day after your next paycheck. The amount can increase later. Transfer. Completing the first transfer matters because it turns the retirement projection into a system that is already running. Once you know the assets that you plan to own, apply the withdrawal assumption to each sleeve. Use 4% for traditional assets, and if you share my Bitcoin assumptions, 8% as a planning lens for the Bitcoin sleeve. In our 30-70 example, $60,000 of spending produces a target of about $882,000. Then set your savings rate as high as you can reasonably sustain, and put the 4-year stacking sprint end date on your calendar. If you're starting from $0 in 2026, give yourself a real shot of being done by 2031. I've made this run once before. You can absolutely do it. And this is the map that I'd use if I had to do it again. Your first step is to calculate your number and move your first dollar. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the system as I build it out over time. We'll see you at the next one.